Delaware is not afraid to tell you their significance to the founding of the United States. It's right here on their flag. On December 7th, 1787, they were technically the first state of the United States after ratifying the Constitution, meaning that from December 7 to December 12, 1787, when Pennsylvania ratified the Constitution, this was the entire legal map of the United States of America. But how did this happen? How did you guys let Delaware be the very first state? First, a little history about Delaware. Delaware was first a colony of the Netherlands before they switched hands over to Sweden. However, in 1664, England forcibly took Delaware from Sweden and made these territories a colony with the name of Delaware. After a long, confusing couple of years where Delaware was claimed by Maryland, Pennsylvania, and New York, of course, but then, war. In 1775, 13 British colonies stretching from Canada to Florida revolted against monarchical rule. The American Revolution had begun. On July the 2nd, 1776, the Declaration of Independence was agreed upon, and 2 days later, on July the 4th, it was signed. America was its own nation with roughly these borders. After the Revolution began in earnest after this declaration, these three lower counties became the Delaware State, and in 1776, that entity adopted its first constitution, declaring themselves to be the State of Delaware. Interestingly, their first governors went by the title of president until 1792. Unsurprisingly, Delaware didn't see very much action in the Revolution. The Battle of Couch's Bridge in 1777 was the only major military engagement of the Revolution that took place on Delaware soil. The Americans harried the British Army. However, the roughly 700 colonials were greatly outmanned and outgunned. Washington's troops were slowly driven back. 3 days later, the colonials had dropped back to Couch's Bridge. A hand-picked regiment of 100 marksmen under General William Maxwell laid an ambush in the surrounding cover. Over the ensuing battle, several British and Hessian charges were repelled, but the Americans ran out of ammunition and called for a retreat. The property was taken back by the British, and several buildings were burned. General Cornwallis used the Couch House as his headquarters for the next week as the British regrouped. Shortly afterwards, General Howe moved his troops out. On the 11th of September, 1777, he defeated the colonials in the Battle of Brandywine and subsequently captured the colonial capital of Pennsylvania. Delaware actually had its own loyalist insurrection in April 1778 called the Clow Rebellion. However, the Americans won the battle, and the leader of the Loyalists, Cheney Clow, was executed, and from then on, Delaware was patriotically American. Delaware, as well as the other 13 colonies, were promised and granted under the 1783 Treaty of Paris. The Treaty of Paris was signed on September 3, 1783, and was effective as of May 12, 1784. It was now the duty of the Continental Congress, made up of representatives from all 13 states, to come up with a new constitution for the nation. On February the 21st, 1787, the Confederation Congress called the Convention of State Delegates in Pennsylvania to propose revisions to the Articles of Confederation. On the agreed-upon date, May 14, 1787, only Virginian and Pennsylvanian delegations were present. A quorum of 7 states met on May 25, 1787, where deliberations began. Eventually, 12 states were represented, with fricking Rhode Island refusing to participate. Of the 74 delegates appointed by these states, only 55 bothered to do their job. The convention's initial intent was to amend the powers of the Articles of Confederation, which had proven highly ineffective at meeting the young nation's needs. However, talk quickly began to spring up about replacing the Articles altogether. After much deliberation and months of compromise, on September 17, 1787, the Constitution was submitted to the Congress of the Confederation in New York City. Despite having the power to reject it altogether, they voted unanimously to support and forward it to the states for ratification. Over the ensuing couple of months, two factions soon emerged: Federalists, who were in support of the Constitution, and the Democratic Republicans, then simply just known as Republicans, who were against the Constitution. The Constitution was heavily debated, criticized, and amended. In New York, the hotbed of anti federalism led three delegates from the Philadelphia Convention, who were also members of Congress, to write the Federalist Papers. These three authors were Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay. These Federalist Papers were so effective at making the states ratify the Constitution, they are still remembered today as some of the great founding documents of the United States. Before New Year's of 1788, three states had already ratified the Constitution and became United States. The very first would be the quickest one: Delaware. It's not very hard to be the first to agree on something when everybody agrees on it. Delaware voted unanimously for ratification 30-0, meaning for 5 days, this was the legal map of the United States. The other two states to join by the year's end were Pennsylvania and New Jersey, drastically increasing the size of this map. So there you have it. I could go into more detail on what happened after these declarations, but I think I could save it for another state. Now you know why Delaware became the very first state of the United States. Stick around for next time, where I go over how Florida managed to not get swept into the Revolution and refused to join the 13 colonies to fight with the British, instead remaining loyal to the monarchical cause. What's a Delaware? It's that thing, and you can have it. Why am I even here? Bet. Was it for free sandwiches? How about Florida? No, that's mine, you Yankee. I could make my own sandwiches when I go home. Uh, if I go home. Hey, you. How much land should we give them? Uh, give them. Like a lot of land, but like not Florida? Huh? That's like super vague. Yeah, like I want all of Ohio. Well then, let's give them all of Ohio. Good job, mate. Absolutely nobody wanted Ohio. I tried giving it off to the Spanish, but they didn't want it. They said they didn't want to get nuked. And I tried to give it to the French, but they also didn't want to get nuked. Good job. He clearly wants Ohio. Yippee! You know what, mate? For all of your hard work today, I'll take you out for sandwiches. Yippee!